All right, so first of all, my name is Jason Kagle. I'm actually the Vice President of Software Development. I've met an awful lot of you, but still many of you I haven't. A lot of folks have come up and said, hey, I just don't recognize you. Spent a lot of time on a phone, a lot of conversations. Hopefully this helps. This is usually the mode I'm in and on the phone, so now hopefully everyone can go, oh, now I know this guy. All right, anyway, so we're gonna talk today a little bit about something maybe we haven't talked about in the past, which is really more about some of the processes and some of the investments and some of the things that we're doing as part of the development team, and less about the specific products, except till the very end, when Andy's going to come up and he's going to tell us all about the work he's been doing with the FME plugins. I think there's some really exciting stuff in there you're going to see and hear about today, and so looking forward to that part as well. But like I said, for today, we really want to talk a little bit about some of the updates. You've heard a little bit in some of the other presentations about how we've grown. We're going to talk about that, what that's really meant in terms of changes to the team. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the investments we've made in the underlying technologies that we utilize and some of the processes that we use in order to actually release the software and build the software that we deliver to you guys every day. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about our roadmap development. We're going to be changing the way that we actually build out our roadmaps on a regular basis. We're going to start that process in Q4 of this year. It's going to engage you a lot more closely, and I think you'll be excited to hear a little bit about it, at least I hope you will. And then actually the last thing I did want to make sure I touched on is release cadence. I want to talk a little bit about our release cadence now and how that's going to look going forward for our products. All right, so the first thing is earlier this year, brought all the developers together and said, hey, so what is it that is most important to you? What are the things that are most important to the organization? What is it that really kind of stands out about our team, and what is kind of the vision that we want to set for ourselves? This is really kind of where we landed. We're really committed to building a product development organization that is fast, efficient, focused on delivering real value to customers. That's our number one priority. We really want to make certain that things that we build make sense and actually add value for all of you. And really, in order for us to get there, we're committed to working transparency, using data to guide our decisions, and then really continuously improving the way that we build, deliver, and support our products. Okay, so Al had mentioned earlier, he thought we had grown almost doubled in size. Actually, we've already gone a little bit beyond that. We're at 120% as of right now. By the end of this year, we'll be close to 180% growth in the development team. That includes roles like Scrum Master, Design, Developer, Test. We're investing heavily in our products and really trying to scale up the things that we're doing. So one of the things that Al had said when he brought me into the team, he said, hey, want to make sure we're ready to scale up. He wasn't kidding. So like I said, first year in, 180%, we'll continue to grow and invest year over year as we need to. So one of the things that we did do, though, is we started to structure the team a little bit differently. So we had one development team before, we had one backlog we were really pulling from. We started to shift and recognize that focusing would provide some consistency and some efficiencies in the way that we actually operate. So we actually split into three different teams. One is our design tools team that focuses obviously on all of our design tools. The other one is focuses on GIS transformation and integration. Those are our UDH products, our products that are really focused on transforming data, moving data around, and lastly is our shared services team. That is a very, what I would say, largely internally focused team. They're really looking at how do we make things more efficient for our developers? How do we take and create things that are actually going to help us scale more effectively? And what are the processes that we're going to need to help support that? In addition, this is the team that really focuses around back-end integration and things like our user portal and other cloud-facing services that we actually have. One of the things I wanted to do before we get too far ahead here is point out a couple of folks in the audience. I think I saw Marty in here a little bit just a moment ago. Marty, you around? There he is. So Marty Palma actually heads up GTI for us, and by the way, I'll use GTI because I just can't say GIS transformation integration too many times without stumbling over it. But as you guys know, Marty's been here a long time. You got to hear from him a little bit earlier. His knowledge not only of our entire product offering, but the solutions and the way that we actually deliver makes him the perfect person to lead this team. And he's really been highly, highly effective at actually taking the core components that we've had and starting to really push those into products that follow a normal product cycle. I also wanted to introduce Val Hutchinson. Val, if you stand up. Val's new to the organization. You all got a chance to hear Val's question yesterday, so he's pretty excited about being with SBS, but we're super excited to have him. Val's been, working in the Autodesk and map arena for 20 plus years. Is that about right? And during that time, Val spent a lot of time with the map team specifically, not only as a developer, but also as a development manager. He also worked a lot in the cloud services area. I believe it was Autodesk Viewer and Forma were some of the products that you've worked in. Val has a tremendous amount of knowledge around DevOps and also a lot of the different technologies Autodesk has been leveraging. So super happy to have him here. If you haven't had a chance to reach out and talk to Val yet, please take a moment and do so. It's a great day. All right, so one of the things that we use as kind of a foundational mantra is continuous improvement. We're always looking at building a culture of continuous improvement, and this is really intended to highlight kind of some of the key elements of it. We learn really both from our successes as well as our missteps. We encourage candid and open feedback throughout the team. We don't chase perfection, right? What we don't want to do anymore is kind of take that very long view on something and say, okay, let's get a 12 to 18 month plan together on our product side. Things just move too quickly for that. We really have to be a lot more flexible, a lot more responsive, and use continuous feedback loops in pretty much everything that we do so that we can adjust as we actually encounter change. So our idea is we don't really try to struggle against change. We try to embrace it and actually make that a part of our foundation as an organization. So, okay, some of our key development investments in 2025. We really focused on things that we thought would be kind of foundational in the way that we actually build software and the way that we do our business. To that end, we've talked a couple times about test development as a key element for us. In addition to that, we've really been focusing a lot more on security. You've heard a couple of times, I think I've had the question, why is it that we actually try to stay up on the latest version of AutoCAD? Leveraging the features is super critical, but I will tell you without a doubt, it's making certain that we have access to all of the latest security upgrades that are being published. You want to make certain that your vendor is actively supporting and maintaining that software, and that we're actually making sure that's getting included in what it is that we deliver to you as well. So security's been super important for us. Another one we're going to talk a little bit more about today is continuous integration and continuous deployment. Also, we've heard a little bit about AI. You're going to hear a lot more about that in this afternoon session, but I did want to talk a little bit about how we're actually using the tools today and how that's actually making an impact on what we're doing. And then finally, it's really been a lot of tooling investment to support all the processes listed above. I didn't want to go through and create one of those slides that kind of gives you a little image of all the different logos of all the different things that we use, because frankly, there is so much now between open source technology as well as the actual packages from major vendors. It would make this really hard to read. So, but if you're interested at some point in time, I'm happy to share that and we can talk at greater length about it. Okay. As we look at test development personnel, we really, one of the things that we did is we made sure that every team actually had test embedded in it. Part of the thing that's super important to us, and you'll hear this term a lot, is shift left thinking. And that's really about bringing testing, and honestly, we'll talk a little bit about security, further left in the process. So the moment that you think about the line of code that you're going to implement for your product, you should be thinking about how it is you can actually test that. Test developers are fundamental in helping to make sure that that thinking happens all the way through the cycle of your product, as well as, of course, developing the automations that you want to help to efficiently test all the various permutations that you have within the software. We've looked at new test frameworks. We start talking about, particularly in the cloud space, we've spent quite a bit of time on open source tools that help make it a lot easier for a layman to be able to create a test. We use things, I'm sure many of you use things like BSD tools like Cucumber and others. We leverage that, but we also use that in conjunction with tools like Playwright in order to actually make our tests both easy to actually create, but also codable so that we can actually, again, put those into something that can be automated. And we're going to talk about how that automation really pays dividends as we talk about CI and CD going forward. We've been looking at test case coverage and test case management. One of the things that we really wanted to make certain that we did is that we had fully thought out all of the various test cases for all the products that we do and make sure that we can manage that. Now, in a normal product development environment, that's a pretty straightforward ask. If you look at basic web software, you got a pretty easy set of inputs and outputs. In our space, it's a lot more challenging. Each of you know that what we have is a unique system and a unique solution that leverages these products. We have to think about a lot of different permutations to make certain that it can be adopted into a lot of these different applications and a lot of different solutions. So I think the testing that we have is a little bit more, I'd say, expansive than what you might see from a typical application need. And so again, test case management has been critical for us to help flesh that out and continue to develop it going forward. And then lastly, we've started looking at investing in AI testing tools. How can we leverage AI to actually help continue to reduce the burden around test case creation and test execution? In particular, this is, I think, a unique challenge within the desktop environment. Again, you see browser-based testing. That's easy, a dime a dozen in terms of frameworks and approaches to it. When you start thinking about the desktop and actually working within the Windows environment, it's a much narrower field in terms of the tooling that's actually open to you right now. And so leveraging AI to help bridge the gap between some of the tools that we're not actually seeing today and that creation has been, I think we're optimistic about what that's going to be able to bring to us and our ability to really drive testing forward going as we continue to move on. Okay. So security by design. So I mentioned before, security is an area where we've continued to invest quite a bit in. It's a major priority for us, and our strategy has really been about baking it in at the very beginning. Talk again about shift left. I want to make certain the moment you are thinking about how that product is going to be implemented, you're thinking about the security around it as well. We're doing a lot more in terms of making certain that the entire code base is being analyzed for vulnerabilities. So we've implemented static code analysis for all of our repos at this point. So we are constantly monitoring with every single change that we have there been new vulnerabilities introduced into the code base? If so, we can log it and we can go out, we can execute and remediate against it. In addition to that, we're also using some advanced security scanning tools for all of our dependency management. So if there is anything that is appearing in the NIST library where we've got a vulnerability that has actually been identified in a library that we're utilizing, it'll automatically notify the members of the repo that, hey, you've got a new vulnerability. It'll also recommend the approach to remediate that vulnerability. So we're looking at both our own code as well as libraries that we embed, not on a daily basis, but literally on a per commit basis or on any kind of change basis. So a lot more strength that we have there than we have in the past. I'd say the other thing, let's see if I can not do that. So we talked a little bit about automated deployments. I think the last thing that's probably worth mentioning is just the opportunity to make certain that we stay abreast with code awareness training, as well as keeping abreast of really where OWASP is and kind of what they've been moving forward. Okay, but really that's not it. We really are going to start looking at threat modeling. It'll be one of the next things. Looking at catch design level risks early, encouraging more dynamic code analysis, so actually analyzing code as it executes, not just static code, but as part of our automated testing process. As you actually go through and execute, you want to be looking for vulnerabilities at that point as well. And then lastly, I'd say just making sure that we have kind of the opportunity to do more like red and blue team analysis, where you're actually doing some scenario planning around security events and responses to that. Okay. All right, CI/CD. So I will say CI/CD a lot. It is, for everybody else here, in case you are not aware, continuous integration and continuous deployment. Our investment in CI/CD is really kind of a natural extension to our commitment to continuous improvement. We're really moving away from large, high-risk updates to more frequent automated deployments. This has been something, I think, where we've seen this really most prevalently within cloud deployments, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're leveraging it there, but we're doing a lot more to see how we can bring that to a desktop approach and desktop mindset. Going forward, if you take kind of a look at what the process overview, this breaks down kind of what our pipeline looks like. Once a developer pushes code, it is immediately tested and validated. Testing includes, as I mentioned before, static analysis of the code to ensure no vulnerabilities are introduced, but it also includes functional testing as well. Now, we're at the stage that we're at right now, we're doing more what I would say unit level testing through and integration testing through our pipelines, except in our some of our utility services for the cloud, where we've actually gone all the way to the far end and are doing our user testing as part of the pipeline as well. So what this means is that with every code change, all of that is occurring. So it's not like we used to be where it was like, okay, we're going to go through a requirements phase, and an architecture phase, and a code phase. Now we're going to have code complete, and with code complete, we'll go through integration. It's a months-long process, which gives a huge opportunity for cruft and for problems to enter the system, and they are so much harder to fix. What this really does is it gives us the opportunity to find a defect or problem as close to the moment it's introduced as is possible. And so you're not sifting through hundreds or thousands of lines of code. You have a much better chance of finding out exactly where that was introduced. So this, again, has been a huge benefit for us. This really also makes sure that our code is always in a state where we're ready to actually deploy. So if we need to get, this is pretty straightforward when you're thinking about annual or even quarterly releases. But when you're dealing with patches, it's super critical to make sure that your code is actually ready to go. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that actually affects us in the cloud as well. As I mentioned, we've got a few services now that really are purely cloud-based services. And in addition to all of the benefits that we just talked about, the other thing is instead of thinking in terms of days, you can now start to think in terms of hours with your deployments. I'll share a little bit about how this is actually manifesting in some of what we're doing already, but this really has a fairly dramatic impact on our ability to reduce bugs in production, provide faster access to new features, and really to have full transparency on the release process. So if we talk a little bit about kind of how we've really applied this and kind of what I would say is one of the teams that's been leading this shared services, that newer team that I mentioned. They were actually formed July of last year. They were fully staffed by the time we got to October. Their key priorities were really around automation of everything. So not only CI/CD, but also maintaining all infrastructure as code. This is another key security element. So what I mean by infrastructure as code, in the past, you usually had somebody in IT who was standing up physical machines. If they were in a data center, if they were on your desk, that's how everything got done. Repeatability was really more through documentation. Did I check all the boxes in terms of how I actually did this work? Infrastructure as code is literally taking and writing code to create and stand up all of your infrastructure. So at this point, everything that we have that is deployed in the cloud is actually backed by code. So not only does that improve our security because we can actually see exactly what's being done, see exactly what policies are actually assigned to every single resource we deploy, but in addition, we can recreate our environments within minutes or maybe hours if you get a little bit of lag time depending on how well AWS is performing. But it is just a huge leap over what we've been able to do in the past. This allows for a lot more flexibility in the way that we test. It allows for a lot more safety, if you will, in the way that we actually deploy because we know what our infrastructure is, what it's capable of. We're able to exercise that through automation as well as the code itself. So, okay, wanted to share a little bit about kind of the differences between pre and post implementation of some of the automation we've been talking about in the CI/CD pipeline. If you look over here, I mentioned before, I think we started, when I joined the organization last year, from the time we actually did our cutover in November, we were able to update the portal, I think, 3 times. Those 3 times were manual efforts. They required a lot of heavy lifting. And unfortunately, we had kind of a really, really long lead before we could actually get something out the door. And you can kind of see that here, as you can see where some of our deployment, this actually shows kind of what our releases were. Once we actually cut over, and this is very recent, this was July 11th, to actually using the new CI/CD processes and new automation, we went from essentially 2 to 3 releases to 31 releases of the portal within the first month. That includes 10 releases of a brand new product for managing project, we call it project utility, but helping to manage projects within the organization and our partners, as well as another internal tool, which is really around how we manage our products and our product deployments. So in the span of 1 month, we were able to release 43 times. That's only to the production environment. That doesn't actually include pushes that we had to our testing environment, our dev environment. So this number is probably closer to 80 to 100 times. So when you compare that kind of efficiency relative to what we were doing in the past, pretty pleased, obviously, with the results that we have there. You can also see the numbers in terms of our ability to deploy fixes and features across each of those. Previously, our feature set was really fairly small. We did have a very large, I'd say, update in November that did have a lot of features. But all of this is actually what I would call post V0 release. So we had a lot of features already in the queue when we did our first release. All the numbers that you see here are things that were done literally after this was available in production. So one last thing to note about that is all of these updates were able to be done with zero downtime. So maybe you've noticed, in the past we've had to take it down. Everyone works over the weekends, nobody sleeps, everyone sweats when Monday comes around. That's no longer the way that we do this. We can do this in the middle of the day, we can do this at night, doesn't really matter. We have enough robustness in our system where we can very confidently deploy fixes and features without having to take anything down. Okay, some of what's next for our shared services team and kind of what they're doing there. We talked a little bit about the SBS Assistant. Our goal is to really get that into the portal, so it is now going to be available to everybody to actually start accessing. We're pretty excited. I know Sergey's going to talk more about that this afternoon. I know the team's excited about that. I think it's going to be a huge uplift for just you getting quick answers to the information that you're looking for. We're going to be looking at finer grain role-based access for the portals. Right now, I think we have the idea of an admin and a user. We want to get a little bit more granularity in there so that you can assign access to different individuals as we start bringing in new capabilities. Things like different kinds of reporting, you might want to have a certain group of people that can have access to that versus maybe the ability to actually assign and unassign licenses to users. So we're going to continue to look at that and look at the roles that make sense for deployment there. We want to make single sign-on self-serve. Right now, we do support single sign-on. You do have to reach out to us and kind of work with us to help kind of work through some of the process of that. We want to make that something that anybody can pick up at any time on their own. Status page for all services. One of the things that we really want from a transparency perspective is for all of our users, all of you, to be able to take a look at what is the current status of the system. If you're having trouble with something and we haven't sent a notification, we want you to have the same view into our universe that we have ourselves. So you can say, oh wait, I can see one of the actual dependent services is down right now. Here's the note on it. Fantastic, I've got much more information. So again, more around transparency and speed at which we're actually communicating. Reporting, we get a lot of requests for reporting and seeing that fleshed out. We'll be doing a lot more with that as we go forward. Interested to hear everybody's thoughts around that and kind of what would be most useful. Back-end integration automation, this team, one of the things I haven't highlighted is all the work they're also doing in connecting all of our back-end systems. And that makes it a whole lot easier for people in the support organization to be able to look at something and go, oh, okay, I can see this customer, I can see their history, I can actually see what they're using, who's online right now. A lot more ability to start pulling all the pieces together and look at things holistically. So when we're looking and talking with a customer, it's not just about that one element, we can see a whole lot more insight. And then lastly, what I would call self-healing systems. One of the first things that you do is you look at monitoring and alerting. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But once you've started to be able to identify problems in the system, can you build a system that's robust enough to actually take action and address some of those problems? A simple technique like just auto-scaling, right? Being able to actually add more capacity as the system actually needs it. Doing things like, making sure that we've got redundancies in the way that we do our DR and our disaster recovery. Those are all things that we're going to be spending some time looking at. So again, as we see any kind of issues that are arising, the system can actually tackle those things that are easiest and then escalate the ones that are not. Sorry, I know I talk very quickly. I keep waiting for people to go. So I'm doing this to myself right now to give us a little pause. Okay. So one of the things I did want to talk about is incident response and observability. We're going to be looking at our approach to observability and incident response and looking at it's kind of a major upgrade this year. For those that maybe don't spend all your time reading tech blogs, observability is really the ability to kind of see inside of our system. Things like usage data, logs, actually all the traces that you have across those systems, making that easier for our teams to have access to so they can actually see what's going on in a particular moment. But more importantly, also to be notified about any issues that occur. We implemented some very, what I would call, simple alerting to kind of get started. So we can actually, it used to be, honestly, we waited for a call from somebody to know when there was a problem, even inside. If we had a server that was down, a lot of times it was a developer that went, hey, you know what, I can't do a build, is the server up? And we'd have to go and do a little bit of work to figure that out. Now we're just kind of flipping that paradigm so that all of our systems are actually monitored and being alerted on internally. So we'll know the moment that we get a hiccup that actually drops below any of our service level indicators. Let me pause for a minute and actually say, so a service level indicator is an SLI, and it's usually what informs our service level objectives. But a service level indicator is something that we have identified as a critical value for us to make sure that we're monitoring. As you all know, there are millions of different endpoints within a system that you could be looking at. What we really want to make certain is we will understand what are those that are most critical. Web, in most cases, you see things like uptime is obviously one of the most important ones. You'll hear things about 3 nines, 4 nines, and making sure that you're actually driving production to that level. Response time is another one. We want to look at things, though, at things like license access, or maybe even things like, are we getting success? What's our success rate on actual emails that are going out for account validation? You want to make sure that you're tuning your indicators to the things that make sense for your business, and then you begin to make your alerts tied to those indicators. So that's part of the work that we're doing right now as we actually go through a lot of the systems that we've implemented. We're also looking at kind of the way that we're actually managing incidents. So what are the run books or the processes that we need to go through when we actually see an S0 or S1 incident? S0 and S1 classification that we have for the type of incident based on breadth of impact as well as severity of impact. So something doesn't let you can't work around it, it affects a whole bunch of people. We need to actually get a group together immediately, and that group starts to think about, okay, what's our response plan? What's our communication plan? What is it we're going to do to actually tackle this? But it doesn't stop there. The obvious kind of war room activity, I think, is something everybody's familiar with. One of the other things that we've started to implement, though, is what we call a blameless postmortem. And so for every incident, we go through and we go through, okay, what is every single activity that actually occurred during that timeline? So we look at the moment the incident occurred, the moment that the incident was resolved. We then make sure that we're pulling all of the logs, all of the data that we can around the systems that were actually impacted during that time. And from that, we're able to really diagnose kind of what is the root cause of the problem. Oftentimes, as many of you I'm sure are aware, you see an incident, it looks familiar to you, you think, oh, you know what, it's this, I'm going to go and treat it, when in fact there is something lower level that actually caused the real thing that created the actual incident in the first place. Part of the purpose of this activity is to then discuss what are the things that we can do differently to ensure this doesn't happen again. And then how do we track that to actual completion and delivery. So again, it's more of that kind of virtuous cycle thinking where we think about not just here's the incident, here's how we manage it in the moment, but it's also what do we do differently to change it, and then how do we actually change our upstream processes to improve that going forward. So some of you may actually start to see, actually I hope none of you ever see, but we do actually start creating incident reports that are available upon request. So talk to me about that if there's any time that you're interested in seeing what that looks like. I'm happy to share that with you going forward. Okay, so I did promise to talk a little bit about AI and developer productivity. Really, I would say, and this is cliche, but AI is helping us work smarter, but it's true. We're using AI-assisted coding to reduce repetitive work, actually make suggestions from time to time, and really accelerate development. In some cases, it's actually even helping to generate test cases. I talked about what we're looking at from products from an AI perspective on the desktop side, but we've already implemented tools on the cloud side to do use case and test case generation. So it's fabulous. It really, we have one test developer for all of our utility services, and he, with these tools, gets coverage numbers that are excess of 85 to 90% test coverage across the entirety of everything that we've actually shipped and deployed to the cloud at this point. And their goal is really to try to hit that 90% bar. The other thing that we're looking at is really starting to think about, it's a kind of making sure that we remember AI is the co-pilot, not the pilot. And I hate co-pilot to use that, unfortunately, because it's a great term. But the point is, this is not a substitute for learning. It's not, we never take code, at face value and just say, well, just inject this in. We are very particular about how this gets used right now. We've actually been, Sergey implemented a policy very early on before I joined the organization, recognizing our need to be thoughtful about AI, but be careful about how we use it. And we continue to evaluate those guardrails, but make sure that we have guardrails in place as we work with AI. Again, it's such a rapidly evolving field, and there's a lot of, I think a lot more that we have to do in order to ensure that it is, ready for prime time for our uses. Last thing I'll say is just that really the other kind of, I'd say, like less tangible benefit that we get out of these tools is inspiration. So what happens is, as our developers are using these tools on a day-to-day basis and learning what they're good at, what they're not good at, it starts to spark ideas about how it can be used in product. What are the things that we can now do to really bring value to all of you by leveraging AI? And again, I'll just keep plugging Sergey's presentation a little bit later. You're going to see a little bit more about how some of that inspiration is beginning to manifest. A few other areas that we're looking at, code reviews and quality checks. This one, again, it's going to be a little while before anyone convinces me, I think, that we can get AI to do 100% of our code reviews, but I do think that there probably is a threshold in which we could start to leverage it. And actually, knowledge sharing and documentation. This is where it is kind of amazing. One of the things that we spent time in the last year doing is getting a lot more thoughtful about the documentation that we're producing, and frankly, a lot more thorough. We've adopted internal communication tools, and I'm sure all of you have heard of Confluence. We have, at this point now, hundreds, if not thousands, of articles about our architecture and about development approaches and about our processes that, frankly, we didn't have previously. And that is so key when you are onboarding and growing at the rate that we're growing. I can't emphasize that enough. And so I think this is an area actually where AI could be a huge benefit to us, is it's great at things like tasks like that. Okay, I'm just taking a breath so that, again, I slow myself down again. So I did want to change gears here. Let's talk a little bit about the planning process and kind of what we're looking at as we go forward. I'd mentioned before, each team operates with its own backlog. And so previously that was 1, now we're working on 3, call it 4. And we really want to make certain that while each team operates autonomously and independently, they do take the same approach. And this is important for a number of reasons. 1, it's make sure that as we engage with all of you, it's consistent. But also, as we engage internally, it's consistent. It's awful if you are working with the design tools team one day and the next day you're going to work with GTI or shared services and they're suddenly using a whole different set of terminology, a whole different set of approaches. You basically have to relearn that process just to go and talk to another part of the organization. So it's critical for us that we're doing this in a consistent way and in a way that we feel is going to drive not just efficiency, but really results that, again, add value for all of you. So with that in mind, one of the things that we're doing is kind of formalizing each of those phases that you saw. Discovery is really the phase where we are gathering insights from interviews, support tickets, usage data, various workshops that we have. And we really are looking at this point to identify problems and opportunities that make sense to solve. It's a cross-functional process. It involves members from sales, from support, from delivery, really led by and facilitated by Val and Marty going forward. But then I'd say the most important part and person in that is you. It's really our opportunity to connect with all of you to understand the business at a far deeper level than maybe we have traditionally. And honestly, to allow our development team to engage directly with you. We really, and I'm going to tell a story that honestly, I'm a bit embarrassed to tell, but I think it emphasizes the point. So 20 years ago plus, I used to work for a company building software in the utility space as well. You may have heard of them. But we were working on an outage management system. And we were going through I think it was our fourth rev on it, and boy, we'd done some massive performance enhancements. We'd kind of re-architected it. It was now blazing fast. So I thought. Sometimes the predictive algorithms could take in excess of maybe 2 to 3 minutes for us to actually determine where the fault laid in the system, which I thought, well, this is great. Gosh, it used to take 20 minutes for us to get to figuring out what the source of the trouble is. We've made such a huge improvement. So then I had the opportunity to go and meet with one of our customers during what they called disaster days. And what disaster days were is they would rerun an outage event, and they would use this as an opportunity to evaluate what could we have done better, what could we do more efficiently. It's great practice. And I had never been able to participate in one. It was super exciting. Couldn't wait to see it. Can't wait to say how great our software did. This was for Hurricane Andrew. So for those of you who maybe weren't familiar with Hurricane Andrew, it tore through Florida, and it was tearing down infrastructure in seconds. So the idea of a minute or two to resolve a problem was not even feasible. It was the most ridiculous assumption that we'd made. And had I not actually gone and spent time face-to-face with the customer, I doubt I ever would have known that. And so again, the point is having people that are actually engaging with you to understand what the problems are is super important for us to really, what I would say, getting it right. And so you're going to see a lot more effort on our part to reach out and engage with you on regular interviews on a regular basis so that we continue to understand your business and so that we're continuing to build solutions that deliver value. Okay. Once we get through kind of our discovery, we get into planning. This is where we take all of the information that we've gathered and we try to create themes or epics out of that. You can think of a theme as kind of a broad grouping of problems that are all kind of interrelated. Using techniques like affinity diagramming, you can begin to see common patterns that occur. And this allows us to take our view from just a kind of single interview with a single customer and broaden it. We can then take and kind of synthesize all of that and create those themes that make sense, and then we see those patterns reoccurring most frequently, and those become the things that we're going to start looking to focus on. Once we've actually gone through kind of our planning phase, and again, I'll step back, this is still a cross-cutting effort. What we really want to do is validate our findings. We're going to make sure, hey, this is what we heard. Did we hear correctly? We want to make certain that the rest of the organization has had the opportunity to kind of bring in some of their input as well, and we really are, again, continuing to tighten down and make certain the things that we have are the things that are most valuable. And then finally, we're into prioritization. Apologies for acronym soup there. The point being, we really want to make certain that we use a standard approach for how we actually do that prioritization, whether it is value versus effort, whether it is RICE, which is reach, impact, confidence, and effort, or whether it is weighted shortest job. These are all just different techniques that you can utilize to help weigh one thing against another. And so this is one of the things that we'll actually use as we kind of distill down all of the different inputs that we have to decide the order in which we actually tackle this. It's not the only thing, it's kind of the first thing we actually look at. And again, this is a collaborative process. This isn't something where developers just go off and go, okay, we've got this now. We need to make sure that we're checking back in and that we didn't misunderstand or that we didn't maybe value something more highly than we should have. So again, you'll see the thing being we want to continue to make certain that we're checking in and going through this. And lastly is kind of our execution phase. You'll see here just kind of the effort around using Scrum. We use kind of what I call a hybrid Kanban Scrum approach across most teams. We'll continue to kind of, I think, tighten that in. We have a single kind of workflow across all three. But this is really where the work gets done. This is really where you plan your sprints. And I I always use this like, oh, everyone knows what I'm talking about, a sprint. So a sprint is a body of work where we say, okay, over the next 2 weeks, we have an identified amount of work that we want to actually achieve. We're going to commit to achieving that amount of work, and at the end of that, that is going to be demonstrable code, right? So it's not just, hey, we're making progress towards a thing. We've broken down our stories from those epics such that we can now start to deliver them in 2-week increments. That also gives us an opportunity not just to validate internally that we've gotten it right, but with all of you. So now you've been kind of part of our process and our journey all the way through this. There'll be an opportunity at which you can engage and start to see, here's how we're making progress, and tell us what you think. Because again, we'd rather hear about that before we release than after. So, okay. We follow this rhythm throughout the year, discovery, planning, and prioritization, execution. We really want to try to do this on a quarterly basis. Why is it important to do this on a quarterly basis? Anybody here who's read anything about AI, I'd say in the last 2 months, recognizes that it changes almost daily, certainly weekly. We have to have a cadence that allows us to adjust our thinking and adjust to changes in the market and changes in the dynamics. And so this is an opportunity to do that. So we're not recreating a brand new roadmap every time. We have a roadmap that exists, but we are making sure that we have a regular point of entry on a quarterly basis and where that's being updated. And we'll find a way to actually share those updates with you as well. I know this is one of the things that Andy and Brad have been particularly passionate about is how do we actually make certain that we are able to share this with the user community more broadly. So we'll get to that. Not in this presentation, but by the time we get to the end of Q4, that's our goal. Okay. So lastly, just wanted to highlight kind of your voice. We're really exploring how to better integrate advisory boards. We've actually kicked off a few on the substation side, or not a few, one. I think we want to look at doing that something similar for distribution. We're going to look at where it makes the most sense to kind of bring users together and start to talk over some of the very specific problems. We're also going to be establishing more formal submittals for requests. You may not know it right now, but today, of course, you can make a request on the portal in the support area. There is a way to actually do that, but we don't get a whole lot of traffic that way. So I want to make certain, A, that it's easy to find, it's easy to access, and that everybody is comfortable. I want you to, if you've got an idea, put it in there. Let's hear it. We really, again, Dave emphasized it a number of times. I think in his presentation, you'll hear it, I think in talking to most SBS employees, your voice is so important to us. So if you've got an idea, throw it in there. We'll take a look at it. We really also want to make certain that we have a way to prioritize both user and partner feedback alongside our internal planning. And then the last thing is just increasing transparency. I've probably heard this now a few times. I think I've said transparency at least 5. We want to make certain that you can see what we're doing and how we're making progress. And I'll also say, when it doesn't feel quite right, let us know. Everything that we talk about is really around virtuous cycles. And so part of that is getting not just feedback on what you want to see in product, but also how we're doing, how we're collecting feedback, what can we do better. So, okay. Appreciate y'all hanging there with me. We're closing in. I want to talk about release cadences. Really, you heard about it, I think, from Dave. You probably already started to see it. I've seen a couple people have asked the support team about it. But really, we wanted to commit to a regular version cadence. Really, it's about setting expectations both internally and externally. This really helps the team plan more effectively and gives users a more predictable update schedule. I think it's important for all of you to understand, when can I expect something from SBS? That's really where we're coming from on this. We do have a couple different types of releases, just 3, major, minor, and a fix and a patch. What really constitutes a major release? Of course, introduction of new functionality, but really it's what we call a breaking change. It's where something maybe has changed in an API that we've published, or in a file format that we've published, or in something that you may be dependent upon integration. We only want to do that when absolutely necessary. We want to make sure you know when that's coming. So that actually is going to be something that's done no more frequently than on an annual basis, and hopefully not even that frequently. But we want to make certain that you guys recognize that those annual releases could be where we have where a breaking release is introduced. Minor releases are really about features and defects. They are what I would call minor features, things that can be typically be completed within a quarter or two, but they're still driving and delivering incremental value quarter over quarter. I did say quarterly. One thing to be aware of is, our goal is to say we want to see our products get released on a quarterly basis, at least for minor releases. It does not mean that every product will get a minor release. We are only going to produce minor releases when it makes sense, when we have the right capabilities, when we have the need for fixes, whatever the case may be. That's really going to be the thing that drives whether or not that quarter actually sees a minor release across that product. And then lastly, our fixes and patches. If there is a problem that we need to address quickly, we will produce that as a patch, and that'll get released, and you'll be notified when that's available, much like we've done in the past. This just kind of gives you an example of what a year might look like. You can see how each product line follows the cadence. Structure gives us, again, more discipline and visibility across the board. Everyone knows what's coming and when. And I think, too, these slides are going to be available. Brad, is that right? Anybody? Andy, slides are going to be available later? Recordings will be available later. Okay. Saw some people taking pictures. I wanted to just, okay, that's fine. Okay. So, with all this efficiency that we've now gained, where's our extra time go? Actually, we never really have extra time, but I will say some of the things that we've started to do, and for those of you just kind of going back to Scrum and sprints, the idea of a sprint is that it's fast and focused. However, if you are doing nothing but sprinting all of the time, you'll get exhausted. Anybody that's a runner will tell you that. That's not sustainable. And so we actually are doing more to plan in breaks into our regular sprint cadence, not just to give people a moment to breathe, but to actually think a little bit differently. We recently actually conducted our first hackathon. And our first internal hackathon actually yielded those top 4 results that you see right there, which was actually pretty cool. And at some point later, we'll publish an article around this just to give you a little bit more insight about some of the things that are being done. But actually, the other thing that was really exciting about this, these were the 4 that were picked. There were, I believe, 27 different ideas that were generated as part of that event. And so giving developers, a little bit of time and space away from that kind of structured discipline and rigor that kind of goes with sprinting to think a little bit outside the box. Sorry for the cliche. It's great, though. It yields fantastic results, not only for the individuals, but really for the organization, because we get insight into some of the more creative thinking. Lastly, I think this has been where we've been able to take some time around AI, think about how we leverage it. And the last time I'll plug it, I promise, is make sure you check out Sergey, and I think Dave will be talking a little bit as well for the emerging technology update. Okay, that was a lot. I really appreciate everybody staying engaged, staying awake. I think the subtitle of this was a peek behind the curtain. I was torn between whether it would be that or whether it was more than you could ever possibly want to know about the processes and some of the tooling and techniques that we have as a development team. But again, thank you all. With that, I really would like to bring up Andy Street, who is going to talk about the FME plugin and some of the really exciting stuff he's done there. Andy?
Okay, hello everybody, my name is Andy Street with SBS. So what I want to talk about today is, you guys all know that we do AUD and we do substation design and AutoCAD-based solutions, but there is another arm of the SBS company that you may not be aware of. We do a lot of stuff with GIS, and we do a lot of stuff specifically with a tool called FME, which is an ETL, extract, transform, and load software package from a company called Safe Software. Okay, and basically about a year ago, I realized that we've been doing all this stuff with AUD for a number of years now, and we've done a lot of stuff with FME as well over the years, but I just realized out of the blue that we hadn't actually used or actually done anything with FME related to AUD. The product itself, AUD, or FME rather, is able to read multiple formats of data, over 400 different formats of data, and it has multiple transformation capabilities to grind up that data and write it in different formats, again up to 400 different formats. But it can't do AUD data. It can't do an AUD drawing. It can read an AutoCAD drawing, and it can read a SQL-like database, but it can't work with both of them at the same time. So put two and two together and thought, well, why don't we write one? And this is the result of that effort. It's basically an SBS AUD plugin. So it is an FME reader and writer for AUD drawing. So it supports any Map 3D enabled drawing, allowing you to read the data from within there or write features into an AUD drawing. And you do it without having AutoCAD there. You do it through the FME engines. It's developed as an FME plugin. But it does leverage existing AUD installations. And so some of the capabilities here, it simplifies AUD domain handling. So I know if you look inside an AUD drawing, you'll see that domain values are all in integer numbers, and then they look up domains on the fly. This plugin will work with that automatically, so within FME you can deal with the data in its textual form rather than the internal forms. It supports the full DWG table schemas, so it can access any objects in the actual features or in the model tables or any of the other rule tables or anything out there. It can go for all of the data in the entire system. The reader capability, it can read any kind of data, full or predicated retrieval, spatial queries, physical queries can be applied. It can handle call-outs, which you've added into your AUD design. It can read those into the FME environment, reads the connectivity, the relationships, containment, the connectivity model. It'll also read all the system tables, TB dictionary, TB attribute, etc. So the functional objective to actually write this thing was basically to expose to our FME arm of employees and customers who use FME in the utility space, which some of you hopefully are in that group as well, the ability to interact with an AUD drawing, create an AUD drawing, read an AUD drawing. So for those not familiar with FME, I just want to kind of take a quick step back, and I think I might overrun a few minutes. I apologize for that, okay? But so FME is a tool, it's an ETL toolkit, it's produced by Safe Software, based in Vancouver. They have three core applications. They have FME Flow, which is a web-based engine system that allows you to run multiple FME engines. FME Form is the workbench, the configuring tool that builds these workspaces that read data, grind the data up with a series of transformers, and then write the data to something else or to other things. It can write to multiple formats, it can read from multiple formats, and then an FME Cloud toolkit, which allows you to basically do FME processing in a cloud environment. Not only is it a product that has 400 different types, over 400 in fact, different types of readers and writers, and probably about 800 or 900 transformation capabilities, you can develop your own on top. So hence, we've written this AUD plugin, which is a reader-writer. We've also written a bunch of transformers as well, and I'll be talking about some of those. From an SBS perspective, we've worked with FME since like the mid-90s when they first started off, when Safe Software first started off. There's a number of us in the company who are highly specialized in using FME, using the tools, writing the tools, working with the workspaces. We're the only US company, I believe, with certified FME trainers. One here, Courtney, who's just joined us again. She was an FME certified trainer, and she'll be getting her certification back again reasonably soon. And on top of that, we've actually written a number of other plugins as well that have been very successful for the company in terms of helping us reach out to new utility customers. One is the Spatial Biz FME plugin for GE Small World. So if you want to do anything with GE Small World, reading and writing the data, our plugin does it better than anything else on the market. Utility network data. FME themselves have 2 or 3 different reader writers for a utility network. Well, it's really for ArcGIS data. They don't really have anything specialized for the utility network. We have a plugin that reads and writes utility network and ArcGIS data, and it does very, very comprehensive capabilities. So if you want to read data from utility network or write data, incremental updates to a utility network database, our plugin for the utility network is a great tool to look at, and I would encourage you to take a look if you're interested. So, having written this AUD plugin, okay, what things can we do with it? Okay, so these are some things I've done, some of the things I thought were kind of good idea. Automated AUD design file creation. I know a lot of utility companies do, they outsource their contracting of their designs to contractors, third parties. It occurred to me that when you're doing that, are you just giving them a blank AutoCAD drawing and saying, hey, AUD drawing, and say, go and design on top of that? Wouldn't it be good if you could take a snapshot of the GIS data, put it in there as a backdrop for them to work off, and do it automatically using an FME flow workspace, basically that would say, here's a new job come in, create an AUD drawing with a backdrop of GIS data, so it's prepped and ready to be sent to the contracting company to start doing their design on top of. Idea that you could do. Construction view. Multiple designers working in a utility company, 100 designers, they're making changes to AUD designs, they save them at the end of the day, they check them into Vault, they do other things, or maybe save them at some file location. An FME flow workspace could pick up those changes, read the deltas on a nightly basis, and create a straw man or a synthesis of the changes that are there and put it into a construction view which could be deployed through a feature service so that any GIS user or any AUD user or some kind of like heads-up dashboard could say what jobs are active at the moment, show me graphically where they are, show me the nature of the changes that are there. That information could now be built using FME, using the plugins to read those changes. Automated validation, I thought that was kind of a good one. I mean, we're making loads of changes to these things. FME could be used as a tool to read those template changes, to validate changes in a drawing file, to basically make it easier. Blend design data with other data sources. I mean, basically you can bring together multiple data, not just GIS data, but you could look at asset management data, SCADA data, whatever you want. You could bring that in and merge that through an FME flow workspace and do that to actually support that. The other one I thought was kind of nice was we have requirements from some customers to do tracing, basically to say how can we either trace from the GIS data into the proposed design data. FME can do that. It can bring the data from the GIS, it can bring the data from your design, it could bring them together, create a network model that would allow you to trace existing and proposed features at the same time, as an idea. Okay, I'm going to, I don't know. I've got to go reasonably quick here. So here's another example case that I put together as a demo, just a really quick one. I know when we do our UDH GIS implementations, it can take a while to get them done because there's a lot of complex stuff going on. As a quick fix, as a quick interim solution, this here is an example of something whereby in ArcPro in the utility network, you could basically click a button, say draw a box around an area in your GIS, and it calls an FME workspace in the background that creates an AUD design file for you with that GIS data extracted and using FME converted into AUD features. It's not as comprehensive as the UDH GIS because it can't handle things like GIS navigation capabilities, lookups of transformer unique numbers and all the other things that UDH GIS does. But as a starter for 10, it might be a useful thing to have that you could potentially use to help training people as you're doing your AUD deploy. So now I'm going to look at like FME transformer. So I've talked about the reader writer, the AUD plugin. You have the ability to create FME transformers as well, and you can write them in C++, Java, or Python. I prefer using Java for a lot of these things, and I have a number of use cases where we've done these things for specific demos, examples. One is a network generalizer for an AUD drawing, a PLS CAD interface to integrate getting data from PLS CAD and converting it into AUD, and then a Revit 3D extractor. So I'm just going to talk briefly about these. So the AUD network generalizer, this is a substation drawing, and the design or the requirement was to basically take that 3D substation drawing and convert it into a one-line or a three-line schematic representation of what is in the substation using, in this case, FME tools. So we read with the AUD plugin, we read the source data, we then convert it into more of an Oracle type network model of node link. We then do nodal reduction on that to remove unrequired nodes, duplicate path removal, a bunch of different tasks, tracing. We actually have a tracing engine built into FME that traces, finds those paths, and then can synthesize or reduce those paths using trace out or shortest path. And then we pass it into another transformer called a Y-files transformer that does the diagramming layout of the result in a form where it looks just like what's in the bottom diagram down there. So that's an example of integrating AUD using FME and then doing other stuff with it. The PLS key builder transformer, this reads XML output from PLS CAD, and using that, and this one transformer reads all of these different components, the structure coordinates report, structure attachment coordinates, etc., all those sections within the XML data, generates AUD features from it with all the connectivity and all the relationships, etc., and then writes them to an AUD drawing as EL pole, EL transformer, EL conductor, EL wire, etc., etc., etc. And the result is what you see on the bottom right there, that you can then say this is an AUD representation of what was contained in PLS CAD. And so using transformers in that, again, in that case. And then this final case, and this is my last slide, this is a Revit extractor, and the requirement here was from a transmission company. They had Revit drawings of their substations. They wanted to be able to take the data out of Revit, the solid models in a Revit model, and convert them into utility network features. So what we have is a transformer that reads, so FME reads the Revit data, the wireframes or the solids. We then have a transformer that takes the solid wireframe representations and does cluster operations against the vertexes to form a path through them, which then converts them from solids into points and linears, connected linears, which can then be written to utility network as features or into AUD as features as well. So basically it's taking those Revit data and forming paths, connected network paths through it using an FME transformer. So these are all examples of things that we've done using FME and that we believe might be of benefit or of value, at least for you to realize that the opportunity is there, that these tools can be used to solve some of those problems. And that's it. That was my little presentation. So, any questions on that? Scott?
What is the inherent differences, pros and cons, on using SBS FME plugin versus using the UX? I think you touched on it.
Yeah. So the two, yeah, so what's the difference between the FME plugin for writing AUD design files or using UDH-GIS, which is our integrated solution for linking your AUD drawing to the GIS system, okay? So basically the FME approach is a bit more, well, it's driven from outside of AUD. So you're doing it outside of the AUD environment, it's FME taking over and it's writing those drawings. It doesn't have as much control or power as writing things directly within the AUD environment. So when you're using UDH-GIS, you're within your drawing, you're reaching out to the GIS. Model Mapper is doing the transformational process of converting from the schema of the utility network or your small world network or your G-technology network or whatever GIS system you're using and converting those into the AUD objects. The UDH-GIS has a lot more capabilities in terms of that it is a process-to-process communication rather than just a data manipulation process. So with UDH-GIS, you've got GIS Navigator is a capability that you can say, I'm in AUD and I want to go to the location of this feature in the GIS. It can search the GIS objects on the fly. You can go and request unique numbers. You can do more interrogation. So say you want to do a design and you want to know, are you designing through a fire protection area or some other area of hard materials or something like that. You can ask the GIS for that kind of information through the UDH-GIS. So that's the Cadillac, if you will, and the FME process here is a probably more like a mini, I guess, really, I suppose.
One follow-up.
Sure.
Is there any level of work done to enable the FME translation that can be later utilized to enable the UDH-GIS model?
Well, I mean, the model mapper process, the model mapper transformational process built into UDH-GIS is quite similar to FME. It's an ETL as well. It's built. We built it within AUD to support those specific processes. So the legwork that goes into creating an FME workspace, the understanding of what the steps are to do the transformation from your pole object to an EL pole, how you map the status, the material, etc., the mappings that occur, all that stuff is reusable. You can bring that. So it's a good starter for 10. And it gets the data to you quickly, more quickly than you would with UDH-GIS, and certainly the knowledge that you gain by doing that can then be reused when you come to do the full UDH-GIS implementation. Hello?
With the FME plugin, you're not able to send information back. Yes.
With the FME plugin, you're not able to send.
Right, as you would with the UDH.
Oh, no, you can, yeah, I mean, yeah, so I can say, I can do an an AUD design and save the drawing, leave Map 3D completely. FME Flow can pick up that this drawing has been saved. It can open the drawing automatically, read all the changes in there, or everything that's in there if you want, detect the changes that are being made, read them out and write them to the GIS automatically. So we're using it, or would we use it, for things like automated updates from a design. So say in some cases you finish your design and the design is such that you need to send it to the GIS for playback because it's a complex design and you want the GIS guys to be able to play that stuff back. That's one way of doing it. Alternatively, you could just say, finish the design. If it's a simplistic design and it doesn't really require playback, you could just automatically read it from with FME, write it straight into the GIS without requiring that playback phase. And that's a, auto playback or auto processing of the design drawing could be done using FME.
So once you have data in FME, then allows you to write that data out and then use it over the open format. So if you wanted to take your AV data and then push it to like CityWorks or literally any other system that FME supports, it gives you that opportunity. So that's kind of one of the big differences between using FME versus giving you a lot more opportunities where you can actually do it.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.